So we are going to be talking about why the modern dating world is so messed up. I'm going to be diving into some of my theories around why is it that men and women are not getting along right now? Why is it that dating seems so complicated? There's a lot of game playing, a lot of manipulation. People aren't trustworthy. You can't really build anything solid with someone. And even though we all really feel this way, we all kind of want to have these great relationships, these great love lives that are super passionate, we're constantly finding ourselves playing games, and we're constantly, just not having very satisfied and healthy relationships in our lives. So I want to explore why this happened and why we're at the situation we are at right now in 2020 with the current dating market. So I'm going to give you some of my theories around this, and the reason I'm doing so is to provide you with some awareness as to what's happening. When we understand why something's happening, we take the one subject of our lives, this crazy, chaotic dating lives that we experience, and we turn it into an object that we can study. So through awareness, through actually understanding and being able to contextualize the content of our lives, we're able to take what was once something that was affecting us, once something that we were constantly trying to manage or we just gave up with, right? And we can take that and understand it, make it an object that we can study. And at that point, when you understand something, you're able to realize why something's happening and you can move beyond it. I'm going to tell you right off the bat that there is enough variation in this world to make any of your belief systems valid, to make any of your wants and desires actually happen. Yes, we don't live in a nothing for something world. All things have costs. But if you can understand why you're getting what you're getting, why the world is what it is, you can figure out how to navigate that, and you can figure out what is the series of ingredients that make up a recipe that is a good, healthy relationship, or one that you're looking to get, whether that's a healthy sex life or a healthy dating life, whatever it is. There is a series of ingredients that make up that recipe. And so by me explaining these things, by me exploring this topic, I'm going to give you some awareness to help you navigate that, to take the one subject and turn it into an object. So that's the goal of this, and I hope you find it entertaining. So I'm going to rant and probably go off on a bunch of different tangents, but let me give you some ideas as to why I believe we are in the situation we are in. So in order for us to understand why we're here, we have to look at how this probably developed. And this is kind of my insights into why I imagine this happened. So right off the bat, I'm going to start with men and women are on different developmental paths. And what this essentially means is that men develop sexually at a different time than when women develop sexually. Women will acquire the majority of their sexual development, which is how they relate to men, at a different period than when men develop that, which is how they best relate to women. And the reason for this is evolutionary. And so what we can typically see is that men will acquire the majority of their sexual partners, like their short-term hookups and this sort of thing, between the years of 24, 25 to around 27, 28. Whereas women will typically pick up most of their sexual partners between the ages of 17, 18 to 21, 22. Right? And these phases are kind of, we culturally know them as like the party phases, right? So, oh, she's a party girl, or that guy's a fuckboy or something, right? We have these labels for people who are in these stages. Now, what's important to note is that what a person's doing in these stages is they're figuring out and assessing where they are in the sexual marketplace. They're assessing how do they relate to the opposite sex, right? How do they connect with men, or how do they connect with women? Now, these are very different timelines for men and women. Men don't concern themselves with this until much later. Even though they're very concerned with sex, even though they're very concerned with like how do you get laid, they don't fully articulate the identity. They don't fully develop this sexually until much later in their 20s. And the reason is that there's another development for men that they're going through first, which is their identity. Most guys are very concerned with their finances. How do I get my financial house in order? It's like, I don't want to start a relationship until I can take care of not just myself, but take care of a family and stuff like that, right? So men have financial clocks, whereas women, you probably have heard, is women have biological clocks, right? So women are more concerned with getting their sexual development, their relationship house, kind of sorted in their early 20s. Whereas men are more concerned with how do they get their finances in order, what is their role in society, where are they on the social totem pole, what are their skill sets, what's their purpose in life. They're figuring out this thing in their early 20s instead, because for them, it's like, well, if I want to be in a relationship, I gotta make some money, sort of thing. And it's not that women just want money, but what a lot of men have realized, and what a lot of people, you can even look, and it's pretty obvious, is if we were to go back to our Paleolithic era, we go back all the way to like 10,000 years ago, and we're in tribes and such, what you'll probably notice is that there wasn't the same ages dating. If you're a 20-year-old guy, you're not sleeping with a 20-year-old girl. This probably wasn't happening. What was most likely happening is that women were attracted to and selecting older men, guys who already had their roles figured out. And the reason for this is that back in our survival era, we're looking for people who can aid in our survival. So, for example, if you're a woman, you're going to be very attracted to a dude who's, he can provide and protect. You're going to be very attracted to guys who are resourceful and resilient, right? Guys who know how to keep you alive, sort of thing, right? That's no longer needed in the modern world, but it doesn't mean that's not where we stemmed from. So evolutionarily, we have to look at women have a proclivity more towards their relationships. If you start to ask any woman like about herself, right? Like, oh, what's going on? How's life going? They're going to often tell you about their relationships, their friendships, the bonds they have with people. Whereas if you were to ask that same question to men, they're going to often tell you the things they're doing. They're going to tell you about what they're achieving, what they're trying to go for, right? Now, this difference has to do with what we're focused on developmentally. So men are more focused early in life on what their role in society is. Whereas for women, it's more inclined that the identity is part of relationships. So they see themselves more as a good girlfriend or a good wife or a lover or something along these, or a good friend. Their identity is more heavily tied to their relationships, whereas men's identity seems to be more tied to what they do. Now, obviously, there's exceptions in this sort of thing, but I'm just talking kind of a broad stroke picture here. What I imagine happened is that as our societies developed and we started to really, our population started to really grow, we would build up systems to manage these people. And one of the systems we created was our school systems. And we would sort people through age. Probably not initially, but eventually as our populations grew, it just made sense to put all the boys who were 10 years old and all the girls who were 10 years old together and put them in a class together. And then all the 12-year-old kids, they go together, and all the 14-year-old kids, they go together, not like this, right? And what ended up happening is that human beings will often date who they know, obviously. They'll date who's in their proximity. So if you're no longer in a tribe of a large range of ages, now your tribe, so to speak, is this collection of a class of people your own age. And we're often going to date people our own age, starting out in our early 20s. The problem is that there's mix-matched developments. So what ends up happening, and this is my best guess as to what happens, is women who are finalizing their sexual development, right? Now they're like, okay, finished up with the party girl phase. I want something serious. I want something that matters, right? And I want to really give it my all. I want to really invest my heart into a relationship. Or maybe they haven't went through that phase yet, but they're really like, I'm trying to give my all into a relationship. When they're doing that, they genuinely, I truly believe that most women genuinely started with that. They started with the best intentions. They felt a lot of love in their heart, and they want to put that love into a relationship, right? They want to love and have that love return back to them. And the problem is that for a lot of guys, they weren't at that point developmentally. So even though they were like, they meant well, they're not mean, they're not malicious in nature, but they just were on a different developmental path, right? So if you're dating a young guy sort of thing, it's like he's got one foot in and the other foot out. He's half pregnant. And that other foot out is really him trying to sort out his life. He's like, I want to give my all into this relationship, but I don't even know what my role in society is. I don't even know what I'm going to do for work. I don't know what I'm going to do. What's my purpose, right? And so it's like, I want to figure these things out too. So they don't really go in fully. They might try to, but really it's more often than not just them trying to manage easy sex. It's just kind of like, I want sex, it feels good to have sex, so I'm going to try and manage sex. And I'll do this relationship thing just because it's an easy way to have sex, right? Now, the problem is then obviously these relationships don't work. When this happens, women get bitter, right? They get upset. And again, another thing in society that's not taught is really how to correctly get over relationships, how to really heal from this sort of thing. So women become jaded. Women become like, they hate men sort of thing, right? And even if they try to suppress it, there's this thing that's like, we're hardwired to not experience pain. So we really just like, I don't anything that causes me pain, no way. So they put a lot of pressure on men. They put a lot of like expectations. They become entitled to certain things. And this is obviously a protection strategy. So what ends up happening is that when men get to the age where they're actually ready to be in a relationship, they're ready to actually like commit fully into something, the women that are their age, they're like, these women are jaded and bitter and stuff. And because it's so normal, most guys just are kind of like, well, I'm not really interested in this. Then they stay kind of fuckboys, if you will, right? Because it doesn't make sense. Like, why would you want to be with somebody who's jaded and bitter and things, right? So what'll end up happening is they'll date younger women. And you kind of can tell why that this is actually happening if you look towards social narratives. You look towards what is very criticized. And what you'll notice is that if you're a guy and you're dating someone who's a lot younger than you, you're going to get a lot of heat. Society's going to be like, shame on you. You got to man up. You got to stop dating these little girls and like get an actual woman. Be a man, you know. There's a lot of judgment and shame towards this, right? But from a male perspective, you're kind of like, why on earth would I want some like jaded kind of older woman sort of thing, right? It's not even about the age. What you'll notice is it's actually about just that emotional element. They don't want that jaded thing. And so you have this really weird thing going on here. And a lot of guys, they try to play therapists with it, but they're not therapists. A guy shouldn't be your therapist, and a girl shouldn't be the guy's therapist, right? And so what ends up happening is that there's this mix match going on. So that's what I imagine is going on. And the question from this point is, how do we solve this? The immediate reaction to this is like, okay, well, it would serve women if they worked on actually healing correctly from this, to stop playing games and stuff. And what does this kind of look like? Well, this will typically look like actually, and this is kind of harsh shit, especially a lot of women don't want to hear this coming from a man, right? But if you look towards what are the strategies that are presented socially, that's a good indication to do the opposite. So for men, you're going to hear like, oh, shame on you for dating a younger woman. Well, that probably would solve a lot of these issues, because now you're coming from, you have a kind of a fresh slate, if you will. You kind of are also, you're more confident, you know what you want, and you're not going to put someone through this emotional roller coaster, and like, you know who you are at this point, right? So you're going to have a healthier, happier relationship. On the flip side, if you're a female, what are you told socially? It's like, oh, you just got to look younger, right? You got to look younger, you got to be more pretty, this sort of thing. You'll notice is that sort of strategy doesn't actually lead to higher quality guys. Yes, guys are very visual in their attraction, so they're looking for younger looking women sort of thing, but that's not the strategy. The strategy is actually to be more pro-social, be more supportive, have a higher empathy level, right? Really look towards selfishness. Right? If you kind of become a person who you start to act more with more empathy, you develop more concern for others, you start to be pro-social, if you will, right? You build more integrity as a human being. If you start to do these things, you start to actually forgive men. You start to actually really look towards like, how can I heal these assumptions? How can I get rid of this stuff and really heal properly? I have videos on how to heal after a breakup as well. But if you start to do these things and you do a lot of personal growth work, right? You really work on yourself. And you pick up, a habit at the gym. You correct your diet, sort of thing. You pick up new hobbies. You learn new skill sets. You maybe learn about psychology, right? Whatever it is, do some personal development, this sort of thing. If you focus on these things and improving yourself and just making your life more passionate, what you'll notice is that it's not about age. It's really about you become a happier person. You become a person that people want to be around, and you become more attractive. So this is really the solution. Now, the funny thing about this is that what we're really trying to do is just navigate this. I think long-term, this is something to look towards, but it's one of the ways in which a system hasn't necessarily served us. And I think we're kind of hitting a weird boiling point, a weird tipping point, if you will, where there's a lot of conflict and there's a lot of tension around this. Now, the strategies that are being promoted don't necessarily work. What you hear from society that tell men is just like, oh, you just got to be yourself, be a nice guy, this sort of stuff. That stuff doesn't work. That stuff is actual trash, and it confuses guys, right? Because there's a lot of guys who they really want to invest into relationships, they really want to give their all into stuff, but the ways in which women pick sexual selections that doesn't work, right? Women are choosing, they're sexually rewarding guys who are fuckboys, right? They're rewarding them with sex, and it's kind of this weird strategy that doesn't really make sense. It's like, well, as a girl, for example, it's just like, well, I don't want to have sex with anyone I'm not attracted to, and that makes sense. And I just happen to be attracted to guys who don't seem to give a shit, right? Now, you have to look towards what that's going to do culturally, right? Guys are going to pick up on that, and they're going to go, okay, well, I'm, it's just like, I guess I'll better be a fuckboy. It just makes sense because it's like, it's a better deal. Imagine a guy who's like really putting in a lot of effort. And as he's putting in a lot of effort into a relationship, he's finding out, he's like, oh, wait, like, he's like, yeah, I sleep with her, I have sex, but you know what, like she was like just sleeping around with some random dude that she didn't care about, right? That isn't putting in all the effort. That makes a guy feel like trash, right? So a lot of guys are picking up on this and they're like, well, that's a bad deal. Like, why the hell would I do that, right? One of the things that we can do, I think, culturally to fix this issue, long-term speaking, is we have to realize that this is, and by the way, my opinions on this don't come from a religious background or even a moralistic one of what's right and wrong. I'm just looking pragmatically at how the mind functions, and we can make the assumptions from that point. So one of the things, the solutions that I come up with for this long-term is really, we have to see that a human being is a biological creature and also a psychological one. And our biologies are wired one way, and our psychologies want another thing, and those things don't match up. And so we have to learn how to manage these. And one of the ways I've figured out for managing this is, ironically speaking, is kind of what a lot of religions promote, right? They promote waiting for sex, right? Waiting till marriage. Now, I don't necessarily believe you have to wait till marriage. I think that's actually a bad call. And we'll stay off that topic for a bit. But my point is that what you want to do is, you'll notice that when you are attracted to someone, you feel amazing. You have a chemical cocktail that you're sipping on, right? It's vasopressin, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. It's a lot of the goody stuff, right? And this sort of thing, when you're sipping on it, makes you feel amazing, and it's super addictive. The problem with human beings is that as we feel something, we need to explain it to our minds. So we fill in a story as to why that's the case, when really it's just a biological reaction, right? It's just attraction, essentially. Now, the problem with this is that we are sipping on this chemical cocktail and we start to make assumptions. We start to place meanings to what that is. So we think they're the love of our lives. We think they're like so perfect for us, and we kind of avoid red flags. We avoid all this sort of such. And one of the reasons I think the chastity kind of stuff was promoted in most religions, like waiting until marriage, why I really think that was promoted is I think that at some point there was these really like clever people who recognized that, like, okay, if you wait to have sex with someone, if you wait, what you can do is you will create these psychological habits. You'll create enough attention, you'll have enough focus to really learn about a person and to see them in a high light. Because if you're really sipping on this chemical cocktail, if you're feeling all welled up and good about your life and you're feeling all excited about this new romance, you're going to frame that person, you're going to see that person in a very positive light. And you're going to build up a cognitive habit of doing so. So you're going to always see them in the best light. Even when they do things that's like, the red flags, or they're not necessarily good things, you're kind of warning signs. You're going to see them in the best light. So maybe, they're a little hot-tempered or something, right? Like, oh, they're so passionate, right? You're going to only see them in a positive light. And what you're going to do is you're going to have enough motivation. You're going to have enough attention on that person to spend the time to build up a positive cognition about them, a set of habits of mental thoughts. So you're used to seeing them in a positive light, and you're using that biological impulse for sex to condition a cognitive way of thinking. So you're only ever seeing them in a positive light. So that when you lose that biological thing, which does happen, right? As you start to have sex with someone, you start to deplete that. It becomes normal to you. When that happens, you now have a series of cognitive habits that support a healthy relationship, because you always see them in the best light. You always see them in a healthy light, in a light that's for your best interest. Whereas if you go and you just immediately have sex with someone, right? There's nothing wrong with that as a lusty pastime, but for actually building a relationship, it's a little trickier. Now, it really depends on what you want in life, and I'm just talking about pragmatic solutions for this, but you have to kind of look at it like this. It's as though, some pretty wise people in religion looked at human nature, and they said, well, we can't really teach this to kids. They're not going to get it. They're all riled up with hormones. They're not going to get it. So let's just scare them with hell. Let's just scare them with a concept like hell, that it's a sin to have sex before marriage, and then that it'll just sort itself out. The problem is that with religion and such like this, and we're getting off on a tangent, but I'll keep it short. Our There was always two types of religion. There was the study of the religion, the theology, right? The priesthood, monkhood, essentially the spiritual leader sort of thing. And that person understood the theology, but at a time when the information wasn't readily available, they had to use stories to communicate that to the public. So there was a second version of religion, which is the stories, right? It's the narratives and the simplification of the theology. Now that we're in the information age and you can easily acquire information, you can easily learn faster, and it's easier to learn sort of thing. People are smarter. We don't necessarily need those stories. We don't need religion too, the watered down version. We just need the theology, the human nature, the study of that philosophy. So those insights are still very valid. But because we use that number two thing, religion kind of gets wiped altogether. Everyone's like, no, that's trash. But it's actually pretty smart from a pragmatic viewpoint. If you actually think about that, right? Waiting until marriage. Now, I'm not saying to wait till marriage, actually. I think it's an awful idea. But what I will say is that if you wait, you build up cognitive habits to see someone in a positive light. You actually have the attention that you can place to someone, and even if it's fueled biologically, you now have the power to focus and learn about the nuances of someone. Because when people start to deplete that, what ends up happening, what you probably noticed if you've been sleeping around sort of thing, what ends up happening is you see people for who they are. You see them as just a biology, as just the physical thing. The problem with this is that can never truly satisfy what you're actually after emotionally. So if you are to say you just immediately have sex with someone and now you're having sex with them repeatedly, what ends up happening is that you're not building up the cognitive patterns to see the nuances of their personality. What'll typically happen is that two people are like, we're having sex, you're having sex, and they're both insecure, and their insecurity levels match. So they're like, we're together, we're doing this. And they go really intense together. And that actually builds more of a codependent sort of dynamic. And it's two people who've never built up the focus to see the person in a positive light. They're seeing them for who they really are. And it's not really who they are, by the way, as well. You're just seeing them without the psychological hypnosis and the psychological habit thing. And one side of that, that's good. But you'll notice that in order for you to feel the thing you think you want, which is love, in order for you to feel the emotion of passion that you're actually after, you want this passionate to give a damn about your relationships. In order for you to achieve that, you actually need to have that psychological hypnosis, those psychological patterns building up. If you don't have that, all you have is two biological people like smacking parts, right? There's no psychology to it. There's no narrative to it. So if you're going about it, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I have nothing wrong with just having sex for fun and this sort of thing, but just recognize the limitations of what that is. Recognize what that actually is. You can't actually achieve the thing you're trying to achieve that way. Sure, your relationship can start with just having sex, and then you can get into a relationship and you learn more about the person, and hopefully that works out. But the odds of that happening and actually coming from a place that's genuine, that's actually not two people putting on masks and controlling perception and manipulating each other. I'm talking like real healthy relationships. And by the way, most people don't actually know what a healthy relationship is. They don't even have a palette for it because they never had any blueprints. And the most people who actually do have healthy relationships are pretty quiet about it. They don't really talk about it that much. The reason is that it's more often than not that people are unhappy in their dating lives and in their relationship. And that's not fun to hear. If someone's like, yeah, my relationship's amazing, it's awesome. Like, she's the most supportive person. He's the most amazing person to me. That's not what people want to. People want to hear the drama. They want to see people like, fire, dumpster fire in the background, right? That they're uninvolved with. That's what they want, right? They want the drama of things. So the problem is that a lot of these people who actually do have healthy relationships keep quiet, and we don't actually have a good blueprint. We don't have a palette for a healthy relationship. And so we think toxic relationships, unhealthy relationships, are what relationships are. But a relationship is not a place where you should go and feel like you have to put effort into like that. These ideas are not actually healthy ones. Healthy dynamics of relationships are places where you go to get refueled. They actually fuel you and make you a better person. there's really 2 points to a relationship as I see it. The first point is to have a partner in self-actualization, and the second point is to have someone who enhances the human experience. If you think about, like going to a baseball game or some sort of sporting event or something like this, right? It's funner when there's a stadium of people. It's funner when there's more people to increase the human experience of caring, right? Of empathizing with one team and then competing against another, right? That's what makes it fun. People enhance our human experience. And when we have someone in a relationship, the goal of a relationship is really just to have it enhanced. So someone to help you deal with the lows of things, to really get you through that, but then also someone to celebrate the wins with. If you were just doing it by yourself, it wouldn't be as fun. So the point of a relationship is really just to enhance the human experience, to really take it from something that was, let's say, a 1, 2, and 3 in experience, and take it to something that's a 10 in experience, right? So having a relationship, a healthy relationship, the point of one is really just to enhance that, enhance the engagement of it. The second thing is to share life with, sort of thing. The second point is to have a partner in self-actualization. I think this is where a lot of people mess up on. This is somebody who knows you better than you know yourself and is purposeful in making you a better person. Now, in a healthy relationship, this exists, but in an unhealthy one, it doesn't. And this can only really happen with highly developed people. The reason for this is that it's not evolutionarily in our advantage to help the other person. It is from one standpoint, but it isn't from another. So let me explain. What I see a lot of toxic relationships look like, or what I see a lot of most common relationships look like, is codependent behaviors. So the guy will make the girl needy and reliant on him. He'll isolate her from, parties and from her friends and this sort of thing. He'll slowly kind of be like, no, baby, don't go out with your friends. Let's stay inside and have fun. He'll make it so that and almost all girls will be like, okay, I'd rather do that, right? How can friends compete against sex, right? You think about that, right? And that chemical cocktail, they can't, right? So girls become needy, become reliant, and they become isolated, sort of thing. That's one thing that guys do. What women do, though, is they poison drip. So they lower a guy's confidence, because the more confident he is, the more sexually attractive he is. And vice versa, when guys isolate women, what are they doing? They're not letting her around other competition, not letting her around guys who are potential threats, essentially, to their relationship. That's what this is. It's really an evolutionary strategy to reduce your competition while increasing the amount of sex you're having, right? Or the amount of commitment to whatever it is that you're having. So what women will do is they'll poison drip. So they'll actually go and they'll, the guy will make a joke and it's like, enough of that. It's like, take out the trash. Or they'll be like, you always do this. It's talking in a way, little micro poison drips, little micro jabs at the person's humor, their ideas, and this sort of thing. And it comes off as kind of like, stupid guy kind of thing, right? Or like they're bothered by it, right? And I don't think that people are doing these traits cognitively. I don't think that they're doing it maliciously. It's just very automatic for unhealthy, undeveloped people to do. So the goal is to really transcend that, to develop as a human being and to not do this. Because it's in your best interest. I think men and women really work well together when they're both developed. But it takes some work to get there. You have to be a confident person. You have to actually develop as an individual yourself. And so what I typically end up seeing is when you have two people who are highly developed, the second point of a relationship is to be a partner in self-actualization. This is where you know someone better than they know themselves, and you help them spot those blind spots. You actually help them get better. So you're like, hey, love, you should really you should really stick to the gym. I notice you're really healthy and happier when you stick to those patterns. The problem is that when we care about someone, we love someone, we want to make their lives easier. And oftentimes, what's easiest for us isn't what's best for us. So I'll give you a prime example. I had a friend, some friends and stuff that they were dating, and the one guy was really, he's like a natural athlete. And when he's a natural athlete, what I noticed about him is that he was happiest when he had a momentum of hitting the gym, when he had a momentum of hitting runs. And he'd run every single day. And if he didn't get a run in, you could tell it just it fucked with him a bit. And his girlfriend she loved dolling up. She loved doing her makeup. She loved like taking her time, like getting presentable and like picking out an outfit and really dolling herself up, sort of thing. When they each did those things, they were their best selves. And you'll notice that you have something right now that usually takes, it's less than an hour, and it's usually something that if you don't do in that day, your day just didn't feel right. It felt like kind of like a waste of a day. And it could be something like just like working out or learning something new. So mine particularly is I have to learn something new, right? Or I have to consistently grow. And that could be physically, like going to the gym or something. But it's more often than not, I have to learn something new or I have to advance in my business, right? And if I don't do that daily, and that could be an hour-long process, then I feel like my day was a bit of a waste. Now, what I notice about my friends is that they loved each other and they care about each other, but they would want to hang out. And, his girlfriend would want to come over and she's like, oh, I still haven't gotten ready yet. He's like, I love you anyways. You can come in sweats and I don't care, right? And he was inadvertently making it so that she wasn't self-actualizing, because that action was her version of self-actualizing. It's her, doing what made her the best person she could be. And vice versa, she'd be like, oh, I want to hang out with you and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, I haven't hit the gym yet, sort of thing. She's like, oh, baby, you're already so attractive. You don't need to hit the gym. Like, just come out and hang with me. He's like, oh, okay. And she inadvertently was not helping his self-actualization. So what I notice is that with enough development, you realize that your job is not to make their life easier, but necessarily you're trying to just help them improve and be a better person. But that's not going to be possible if you're not already a developed person. Because why would you want to make your partner more attractive? You have more competition, right? But in highly developed people, in people that have enough self-esteem, enough confidence, they know their self-worth, they are in the best interest of helping their partner become more attractive. Not to make their lives harder, but actually because they know when they make their lives better, their wins when their partner has a win, it's also their win. And you become this unit, this kind of person that you're trying to help the other person grow, and you're both in the game of improving each other. And you know that you're doing this because you have this trust that's built up. So one of the things I've noticed is that we want to start with the point of a relationship, right? And this is the biggest kind of thing I've noticed in the modern dating world, is that people are just kind of like showing up in these relationships and they're just reacting to their biological impulses. And their biological impulses are going to be toxic as hell. They're going to be this poison dripping and this isolating thing. They're not going to actually be self-actualization partners. So we want to start in a relationship, and now we're kind of stepping away from why the world's so messed up in dating culture into what can we do about it, as how can we be proactive in this. So in order to be proactive, we want to start with that definition, that a relationship, the point of relationship is to enhance the human experience and to have a partner in self-actualization, okay? If you can achieve those things, you're going to be in a good place. Now, in relationships research, we look at marriage research and we look at marriage dynamics in this and relationship dynamics. There's common ideas that are tossed around, and one of them is the idea of codependency, okay? And to simply put this, you go from codependent to independent to interdependent, okay? Now, the easiest way to kind of look at this, if we were to simplify that, is I need someone to I don't need someone to I want someone, okay? This is a model that is very much, it's pushed on us in the psych world and stuff, and I don't actually think it serves us. I don't know of many people that are interdependent at all, really. I don't know of many people in that. And one of the things I was really curious about when I started to study relationships is why is codependency by that model, why is codependency so prevalent? Why is it that there are so many people getting codependent? And codependency, you'll notice if you're in a codependent relationship, or you'll notice when you see one, because what you'll notice is that it's like each person has their emotions on a remote control. And they keep each other in an emotional range of 4 out of 10 to 7 out of 10, right? So if a person drops below 4 out of 10, they're right there to pick them up. They're like, no, baby, I'll help you. But if the person is in a good mood, they're in like a 7 out of 10 or above, they're like, well, why are you so happy? And they actually pull them back down. Like, God, you can be so happy. Don't you know I'm suffering? And they inadvertently keep each other between a 4 and a 7 emotionally. Now, when this happens, this is kind of codependent, and it's the kind of things they can't be happy without the other person, sort of thing. They're dependent on that person's emotions to be happy. Now, that codependency model, when we actually look at that model, right, codependent to independent to interdependent, that model, it sets up a lot of people for failure. And I was like, man, I don't really know a lot of people who are in this model. Why is there so many people in this codependent? And the goal isn't necessarily just to be two independent people who you're like, I'm doing my thing, you're doing your thing, and yeah, then that's respectable, and then that's how it works. I don't need you, and you don't need me. That's one point of view to look at it, but that to me doesn't really strike me as a natural goal to aim for. It doesn't naturally strike me as something that is going to work when we look at our biology and our psychological wants. Instead, what I've noticed is because codependency seems to be so prevalent, it must be that there's an actual reason for it. And what I've noticed is that if you actually notice how much we want to merge with one another, we actually want to merge our lives together. You notice that there is this pattern in human relationships to naturally merge. You want to engage with people. You want to naturally, build things with other people. You want to build a life with someone, invest into a relationship. If you notice that need to want to actually get closer and work as a team, that is being labeled as codependent right now. Now, codependency is one sort of thing, and I believe that's the byproduct of people not developing as individuals. They're not actualizing their own potential. Years and years ago, decades and decades ago, different cultures ago, it was easier to actualize your potential. In a relationship, the point of relationship wasn't love, it was survival, right? That's essentially what it was. It was a good decision, right? In fact, growing up was getting into a relationship, and you guys bought a house together and built a family together. And that was growing up. Now, to grow up is a lot more complex, isn't it? It's not just a matter of getting into a relationship. What it is now is knowing your purpose in the world, knowing, who you are, what's your role, what are your social groups. It's getting into your career. It's doing something you're passionate about as well. And then it's also figuring yourself out spiritually, right? If you're into that sort of thing. It's a lot of these different things. It's no longer, growing up is no longer getting a job. Now it's about getting a job you're good at, that you're passionate about, and that serves your purpose in life, right? It's figuring out it's being confident sort of thing, building up a social life. It's getting your finances in order. It's all these things. It's like, I want to be this perfect person before I get into a relationship, seriously. Growing up now and developing as a human being is a much more complicated job than it was for our parents and for our grandparents. And because of this, there's a lot more room for growth as an individual before we get into something serious. So how do we take this into account with everything? Well, if you actually look at this, you can start to see that, yes, we need to grow as human beings first, more so now than ever, before we get into serious relationships. I think that the best way for most people to get into something, or a good rule of thumb, is that don't get into anything serious until you're in your 30s. That's kind of a good rule of thumb in 2020, right? Now, the reason I say this is that you're probably not even at a point where you can have a healthy relationship because you're too concerned with, finding your career, getting into something that you believe is, your purpose in life sort of thing, figuring out your spirituality, figuring out who you are as a human being, right? Getting your financial house in order, these sort of things. Now, I'm not saying you need to get all those things in order to get into a relationship, but what I am saying is that what comes with those things is levels of skill sets in communicating, skill sets in empathizing with other people, skill sets in, being a good partner. Now, these skill sets are required. And when you don't have those skill sets required now, you're going to have what we typically define as this codependency, where two people have that tendency to merge, but they don't have the communication skills to make that merging happen effectively. So it's like these two broken individuals, these two insecure people, like, you're completing me, I complete you sort of thing, and they make each other miserable. What you want to do instead is you want to grow into the person you want to date. You want to become a person who is highly developed and be playing at a high level in your life before you actually get into something serious. Now, The reason you do this is because you need to know how to communicate. You need to know how to empathize. You need to know how to work with people. You need to understand what you need personally from a relationship, and also how do you give in a relationship, right? You need to understand that men and women are different. We have different communication styles. There's a lot of this, right? It's like almost like you need a bloody PhD in relationship dynamics to understand this stuff. But this is kind of where we're at in the world today. So my best advice is this. Focus on improving as an individual. Focus on being the best version of yourself you possibly can be. Don't stress too much about your relationships. Not until you're later in life, until you're more developed. Learn to be a good communicator. Learn to not react, right? Not just, get emotional and lash out on people, right? Learn to gain some emotional control. Learn to understand people first before trying to be understood. These sort of things. There's a lot of great books on communication. You should study them. A lot of great books on relationships. It's worth going through. Be proactive about this. And what I will say lastly is this. There isn't necessarily a right way to do things anymore because of the complications of stuff. Because there isn't any good models. The best models are going to be the models that work for you. The models that serve you and your partner's best interests. You guys need to design something together. And when you guys both design it, and you're both proactive, and that's part of developing as a human being, is you're no longer an individual that just reacts to things, but rather you're proactive towards what it is you want. Imagine having someone that you build a life with based on design. In the same way you would go after a goal, you have relationship goals. You're saying, so when you meet people, you know what it is you want, you know why you want it, and you know who you need to be to get it. And you create a marketing plan in order to attract that person, right? And if you can understand these things and you approach it from this angle, imagine that individual. Imagine being able to meet with someone at your level and be like, let's build something together. And get on that level and you work towards it. You create goals. Sexually, you create goals. Relationally, you create goals. Financially, you guys create goals together and you build a life together. I think it's natural that human beings want to merge. And I think that if you can find someone and you find a system that works for you guys and you can be proactive together, you can inject consciousness into what it is you guys both want. I think when you guys do that and you're proactive about it, you can find something that works for you. And the last point I'll make on this is that you don't have to look towards what you see in the world as what's available. There is enough variability in our experience and in our realities to make any belief, any way you want to live the world possible. It's not a nothing for something world. Everything comes at a cost. But my point is that there is genuinely enough variety in our experience to make any of your wants and desires possible. And they don't have to meet a traditional viewpoint of relationships. They don't have to be this sort of, what you see out in the world. Most people don't even have a palette for a healthy relationship yet. So it's important to grow as an individual. But these are the final points I have for you. We've talked about a lot of different things. Hopefully you guys have found this insightful, and thank you for listening to me rant on this topic. I shall talk to you guys in the future. All the best.